Thank you very much. I want to thank Irene and congratulate her for this amazing start of highly needed operation by all of us together. I had the task of telling you about pregnancy. I have only 15 minutes, so I decided to tell you a story that goes all the way from the beginning to the end to emphasize the issue of safety. Actually, it's quite a shocking story, so I'm sure you will appreciate some of the details. I'm jumping in just to allow myself the 15 minutes. And I will start from the case itself. There's nothing like a case to bring us. This is a real story of a child born full term, novice mother, she never had a pregnancy before, in Toronto, highly educated, the same is with her husband. She thinks the baby is not doing well. His color, he's not eating well, but it's her first baby. So day 10, she goes to see her physician, the pediatrician, not because of the problem, just the day that she was given, and she tells him the story I told you. He does what pediatricians do. He said, well, the baby is not eating well. He weighed the baby to find out that he gained back his birth weight. We lose up to 5-7% of our body weight. So he says to her, Mom, probably baby ate enough because he gained back his weight. And he sends her home. Baby continued to look unwell. That evening, Mom brings home a friend, family friend, who is a physician. And he finds the baby dead in the crib. That's a huge tragedy. That I think beyond words. I don't have to convince any of you. I know about it because the coroner of Ontario comes to see me as head of toxicology, clinical pharmacology in Toronto. And he says, when we heard a story of a baby that was not doing well and a little bit sedative, we took levels of anything we could, and we found a level of 80 nanogram per ml of morphine. That won't tell you much if you're not in the TDM bit, but I can tell you to anyone who sits here, if you have a level above 20 nanogram per ml, you stop breathing. So I don't know yet why, but the baby died of morphine, or morphine had a lot to do with it. But what's going on? Well, Mom had an episiotomy during labor, and it's very painful. Mom receives Tylenol 3, which is a combination of codeine and acetaminophen. And she's told to take it as long as she has pain. And the pain continues. It's very strong pain, actually till the date of death of this child. And he wants to know if this level of morphine is foul play. Maybe. Now, you may say, how come? Why would anyone even think about it? There are psychoses among women at birth. There are descriptions of women killing babies. I receive a story from her obstetrician that she's a totally well-balanced, healthy woman. There's no background of psychiatric illness. 6 months before that, a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine described an adult who received codeine and almost dies from coma, only to discover that codeine, which is known, metabolized to morphine. Most of us, 10% of our codeine turns to morphine. But if you have duplication of the gene, you may produce 20, 30, or 50%. And that gentleman almost died. So I asked the coroner if he can do pharmacogenetics on this baby. He says yes, and it so happened that indeed Mom is an ultra-rapid metabolizer of codeine. She produced much more morphine from codeine than the next mother on the block. The same is with her mother. So there is a genetic trend. In the literature, if you open, you will find very few cases that someone measured codeine and morphine after codeine, and levels were very low. Levels were 5 and below. I asked the coroner whether there is any chance there is still milk of that case. He said, let me check, and he came back when maybe was not doing well. Mom expressed milk and kept it in the fridge. So I received a sample, and indeed the levels were 80 nanogram per ml, many-fold above the 5 that people measured. So we got another strength to the assumption that this is the case. This is the first time that someone described a baby dying of poisoning through breast milk, which was not described before. So I was very nervous that we are making up a story that was not shown before. So how, to put it in context, in Canada at that time, it's 2005, 2006, about 130,000 moms were breastfeeding and taking codeine, either for cesarean section or for episiotomy. So it means that if this is true, it will not be rare. There is enough opportunity for this to happen, which make it, as an adverse drug reaction, an important one. Okay, how we move forward. Till then, the Academy of Pediatrics, which is kind of the body that tells you every couple of years what you can breastfeed on and what not, at that time said that codeine is compatible with breastfeeding, based on 3 reports of the levels I showed you before. So moms were encouraged to breastfeed. How we move forward, just to remind you, this is codeine getting into the liver, metabolized to morphine. It happened to 10% of our codeine in most of us, but if you are ultra-rapid metabolizer, it can be 20, 30, or 40%. In other words, mom takes the right dose, but she's poisoning herself because pharmacogenetics was not considered yet. Okay. With that in mind, we run in Toronto a mother risk program where we advise moms to be about what they can and cannot take. So we say, let's go back to these moms to find out what happened. Is it so safe or not? So I show you here the first paper, we had many more afterwards, of the first 72 women that we managed to get back to on the phone. And to my big surprise, 17 of them, which is about 20%, described CNS depression in their babies. Either they were sleepy. In the extreme of cases, there was one case that mom told us that she had to put ice cubes to wake up the baby to feed, which is not usual. And the worst of cases, a mother who, the baby was in a semi-coma, she brought her to our own hospital, to the Emerge. They did everything you do to a small baby who is in coma, sepsis, anything you can think. They didn't find anything. However, in the Emerge and the ICU, mom stopped breastfeeding. She was not in the mood for breastfeeding, and everything disappeared. And the baby went home with no diagnosis, while the baby had a life-threatening effect of a drug which is used hundreds of years, but was never considered in that context. I don't have time to make justice to the whole story, but for example, I was still quite dubious about myself, looking for more proof. I gave the same talk I gave to you to a meeting of toxicologists, where a guy from Tucson, Arizona said, wow, on Friday, a mom came with a small baby. She was on codeine, and the baby was semi-comatose. And I gave her the baby Narcan, and he woke up. So he did the TD challenge for me. So I hugged him and said, thank you very much for adding that piece of information. I won't show you all the pharmacodynamics of it. There is much more to it. And indeed, we found among those 17 babies, 2 that were ultra-rapid metabolizer moms. The rest were not. There are other reasons that we worked out, which I won't have time to show you because of time limit. But basically, it became clear that there is a pharmacogenetic component that we never considered before that we have to consider. Based on this single case report and more or less what I showed you, the FDA in 2007 came with a strong warning that mom should not breastfeed while on codeine. More than that that babies should not be given codeine. That comes from the very next chapter of this, which I will show you very briefly. Here is a story of a baby who had sleep apnea because of big tonsils. These are the babies that sleep like this. This is a reason for tonsillectomy, and indeed his tonsils were taken out. It's very painful, so mom was told, give him codeine at home. And we know that she gave him the right dose because we could measure what stayed in the bottle. And lo and behold, baby go to sleep after mom gave him codeine, but he does not wake the next morning. His level is 32. Remember, above 20 you cannot breathe. This baby is an ultra-rapid metabolizer. This was also published by us in the New England Journal of Medicine. And as happened with the Pied Piper, suddenly from all over more cases came to life. Babies that died that mom received codeine, or babies received codeine. Only to exemplify an example of an old drug that was never considered in terms of pharmacogenetics. And more cases came out and published. I show you a story full circled because very often we at the bedside see things that were not described in the literature. We open the literature and say, no one showed it. Well, very often you will be the first to see it. Do remember, it takes physicians more than 4 years to report on one adverse event. We are very bad, the physicians among us are very bad in reporting. So if we are bad, the regulatory agency does not know about it, the companies do not know about it. So here is an example of an error that came out of lack of knowledge. And I think it's very important for us, for the next generation, to work much harder on understanding these processes in order to try to solve the pharmacoepidemiology of what we see. And never, ever say, this doesn't happen because no one described it before. You may be the first. I'm in this business more than 40 years, and there are 5 or 6 adverse events that we described first, just because we took the time to take it all the way. Thank you very much.